are the characters behind science. This is Science Behind the Glass, illuminating the human side.
In this podcast, we unveil the human side of laboratories and science. Scientists share personal experiences and we discuss their meanings from different perspectives and fields of research.
Today, our guests have the extraordinary chance to live in the tomb of the King Pacal. Hello, I'm Linda Hernandez. Welcome back to our podcast, Science Behind the Glass, illuminating the human side. Here, we discuss the human aspects of scientists and researchers. We interview individuals directly involved in the scientific and academic field, exploring the paradigms of academia and science from human experiences. Danny, who is our guest today?
Hello, Linda. That's right. Today we have our premiere series dedicated to the contrast between family and work and how it is seen from the academic and scientific professions. Last week, we interviewed Gonzalo Fajardo, a professor and insect researcher, who shared his personal experiences and opinions. And for this second part, we will hear from Dr. Osiris Gaona, who will discuss the female perspective. Osiris, welcome and thank you for being here. Tell us about your background in science and what your research is about.
Yo estudié biología, después hice una maestría en restauración ecológica, hice un doctorado ya grande, a los 50 años hice el doctorado con 2 hijas. Siempre quise estudiar el doctorado, pero no había podido por lo mismo, de educar hijas, de trabajar, etc. Y me dedico desde hace 25 años o más al estudio de los murciélagos, que son mi pasión, y hoy por hoy hago algo que se llama microbiota de vida silvestre.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I studied biology, then did a master in ecological restoration, followed by a PhD at the age of 50. I pursued my doctorate while I was raising 2 daughters. One is 26 and the other one is 19 years old. I graduated with honors, balancing work, research, and motherhood. I always wanted to pursue my PhD, but I couldn't because I was raising my daughters and working. For the past 25 years or more, I have been studying bats, my passion. Currently, I work on wildlife microbiota, combining my interest in bats and the tiny little world of microbiota. I work at the Institute of Ecology at UNAM, recently relocated to Mérida after 4 years in Mexico City.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. Can you explain us a bit about what microbiota is?
La microbiota es todas los microorganismos, está en el pelo, en los nostrilos, en la piel. De hecho, es un boom filosófico que ha cambiado los paradigmas de cómo estudiar la vida incluso de los humanos y la salud de los humanos. Pero en pocas palabras, es todo lo pequeñito que está asociado a nosotros, en el intestino, en la piel y en todos lados.
Microbiota encompasses all microorganisms, including unknown ones, and even fungi. It exists in hair, nostrils, skin. Actually, it is a philosophical boom changing paradigm in studying life, human life, and health. In simple terms, it's everything tiny associated with us in the gut, on the skin, everywhere.
It sounds exciting. Do you remember the moment or motivation that led you to choose a career in science?
Soy de un pueblo muy pequeñito en el estado de Guerrero y yo recuerdo muchísimo que mi padre nos llevaba de vacaciones a ese pueblo y a mí me encantaba ver los alacranes, ver cómo nacían las vacas, los becerros, ordeñar la leche. Y siempre tuve una sensibilidad por las plantas. Me acuerdo que en esa época pues no había muchas carreteras. Mi padre nos llevaba a rancherías muy alejadas, caminando a veces en caballo, en burro, y a mí me encantaba ver las plantas y las colectaba, y sobre todo los alacranes y todos los animales que encontraba. Yo decía, espérense, déjenmelos ver, y me ponía a verlos y observarlos.
I'm from a very small town in Guerrero. I recall my father taking us on vacation there. I love observing scorpions, washing cows, and calves being born, milking cows. I always loved the plants. In those days, not many roads were built. My father took us to remote villages, sometimes walking, sometimes on horseback or donkey. I loved observing plants, especially scorpions and all the animals I encountered. I would say, wait, let me check the box. I would observe them. In high school, when I first studied biology, it was when I had contact with biology in those labs. Born in 1969, there were huge jars with human and horse fetus. I was like, what is this? With deep dissections, with rabbits and everything. Understanding how these things work was always an enigma and fascination for me. I was so curious and loved science because I wanted to understand how things work.
Very interesting beginnings, both in your childhood and high school. How did you transition from life on the ranch and animal dissections in the school to being interested in bad ecology and the microorganisms that inhabit them?
Llegar aquí a este punto de la microbiota fue un camino un poco complejo. De hecho, estuve pensando en ser médico, pero yo decía, no, si se me muere un pariente o un ser humano, yo me voy a morir. Entonces, lo más cercano era la carrera de biología.
Reaching this point and working with the microbiota was a complex journey. I actually considered becoming a doctor, a medical doctor. But I thought, what if a relative of a human being dies? I will die. So the closest option was a biology degree. I was an outstanding student at the beginning, but then not so much. After finishing, quite young at 20, I taught English and biology in high school. Then my professor, with whom I worked for nearly 20 years, arrived from the US with a focus on bats. Imagine a 24-year-old girl traveling from Mexico to the Lacandon, first by plane and then in a tiny little plane. Seeing the jungle from above, I thought, wow, this is marvelous. There, I initially studied iguanas, but I couldn't find. Then I switched to study bats, and it became my passion for life because Dr. Medellin, the Batman of Mexico, who taught me, was incredibly passionate about this subject. I believe that has a lot to do with it. When someone is passionate about what they do, they infect everyone else with that passion. Later, I had a disagreement with Dr. Medellin, and I was sent to Dr. Luisa Falcon's lab, which was doing something completely different to what I was doing. We both suffer when we look at each other and, like in cartoons, both scream, oh my God, this is terrible. She suggested I pursue a PhD in microorganisms topics to gain experience with pipettes and everything. At that point, I was already 48, shifting my focus entirely from observation biology, environmental laws, and CITES to another field. So I had to relearn how to use a pipette. And I tell you, I became very passionate about the topic. But I told Dr. Luisa, I'll do the PhD, but including what I love, which is bats. That's where we bridge the gap between the macro and micro.
Amazing background. How do you consider what you do in ecology and microbial ecology is essential for science and the general public?
Wilson dice que una de las preguntas más tontas es preguntarse para qué sirve una planta, un animal. Nosotros que estamos adentrados en esto sabemos que todo sirve, que es un equilibrio en el que estamos viviendo, ¿no? La enseñanza per se para mí es ya loable. La persona científica que estudia y que genera conocimiento, ya eso es loable.
E.O. Wilson says one of the silliest questions is asking what a plant or an animal is for. Those of us immersed in this field know that everything serves a purpose. It's a balance we live in. Scientific education itself is commendable. The scientist who studies and generates knowledge, that to me is valuable. I have always been passionate about biology and applied ecology. So what I aim to explore in my study of the microbiota is to understand subjects that are important for humans. In fact, my work was done with a bat called lesser long-nosed bat, which is an agave bat primarily responsible for pollinating Agavaceae plants. From these plants, we obtain mezcal and tequila, which hold significant importance in Mexico and are known worldwide. The microbiota associated with this bat sheds light on how its function and the overall functioning of this organism. Another aspect is the difference in the microbiota during various reproductive stages. stages, such as pregnant females, lactating ones, juveniles, and so on. In short, the discovery is that pregnant and lactating females, due to their high energy expenditure, diversify their diet. They can feed on a variety of things because, as with other mammals or vertebrates, when they are pregnant, the stomach expands. This creates a large surface area that bacteria can colonize. What does this imply? It suggests that males might be more efficient at pollinating Agavacia plants than females. And what does this lead to? When designing a conservation program, especially for Agavacia plants, knowing that bats are essential becomes a foundation for understanding what can be done from micro to macro level.
Sure. And when you overlap this information generated from the bat's microbiota and their populations and with the populations of the plants and everything else, it becomes quite clear what the importance is in terms of all aspects of vegetation and its reproduction, right? And how it can impact such a crucial industry like mezcal and tequila, as you mentioned.
Yes, there will come a point where medicine will be personalized for you, Danny, or you, Linda, by taking a sample of your microbiota and analyzing it, because now it's very general. They just give you a generic aspirin for a headache, but we are all very different. So that's the point that is probably being explored now with the microbiota, which I believe is something very important.
Well, shifting a bit now towards our main topic of the episode, we have this question for you. How do you find a balance between your family life and your academic career? And how have you managed this task of trying to balance the two?
Ha sido complicado, sobre todo cuando eres pues mamá soltera. Nos damos cuenta también que para las mujeres ha sido más complicado. Tenemos que seguir produciendo.
It has been complicated, especially as a single mother. We also realize that it has been more challenging for women. We have to keep working, even if we are pregnant. Before, they didn't assess us saying, oh, poor thing, you're pregnant. They treat us differently when you were pregnant, because besides you get tired physiologically, also you have to keep one foot in the academia. That's what I emphasize to you, that I complete my PhD late, because my family and my daughters were always more important to me. But I also love science a lot. So I have to juggle both. I woke up super early to make breakfast and pack my daughter's meals. Then I dropped them at the school. One was in primary school, the other one was in the kindergarten. Then I went to work and rushed out at 3 p.m. like a mad woman to pick them up and get home to cook, help them with the homework, and then in the evening catch up on my own work. There were times when, for example, I have to go to the field when they were very little. My mother and my sister helped me. I would tell them, I'm going to be gone for 10 or 15 days, and please look after them. When I returned, the girls could charge me for leaving them because they wouldn't even want to look at me. Later, as they grew up, they began to understand that I have to go to work and do field work, but I wasn't going to abandon them. It made me laugh a lot because I was the last one to pick up my daughters. Other moms would wait, moms who didn't work. I was always the last one in picking them up. At school, they get used to ask my daughters, when is your mom coming? Or what they reply was, she will come. Yeah, but she will be late. They knew it. And they were quite funny because they would say, Mom, why aren't you a normal mom like everyone else? And I would ask, how so? They would reply, because you go into caves and study bats. Other moms go to shopping centers and they get their nails done and play tennis, but you don't. I thought their mom was a witch who hung out with bats. So it's complex, but I think when you know how to organize yourself, there's always a place. I never left academia, always had one foot there alongside my daughters. And well, like everyone, we always said that we make mistakes, but they are well, healthy and studying.
Yeah, that's nice what you talk about your daughters. Tell us more about your family. How do you think they view your career in academia?
Pues es muy satisfactorio y yo aquí se me hace un nudo en la garganta, porque yo no vengo de una familia que haya tenido ninguna científica ni científico.
Well, it's very satisfying and it chokes me up because I don't come from a family that have had any scientists. I am the first scientist in my family, the first woman with a PhD. My grandmother, with whom I spent summers, was a daughter of the Mexican Revolution. She worked as a servant in a wealthy household and later married my grandfather. She was very intelligent, hardworking woman. She managed to learn and read in that wealthy household where a few people knew how to read and write. My grandmother was the pioneer for children to go to school. I'm a mom too. My mom always told us that she didn't want to see us end up like her, without education because she couldn't have one. She said, I don't want you to stay here, taking care of children in a house. These women were the ones pushing us. Sometimes people would tell me when I was 20, get married. You're already too old. Why do you continue studying after marriage? Why keeping studying? So these women were the ones pushing me or motivating me. Sometimes my family asked me, aren't you afraid to go to the field to catch bats? Well, no, I'm not afraid. I like it. My grandmother would ask, dear, what do scientists do? And I would tell her, Grandma, they do many things. But she would say, why not be a teacher, a doctor, or a lawyer? Why a biologist? Well, later on, they see it in a positive way. My mom and dad were also very happy that I studied. And I think when I explained what I was doing, they were really proud.
I'm sure they are. And tell us, do you have any specific strategy that you have found useful to maintain that emotional connection with your family, even when you are immersed in your work as a scientist?
Como tenía tan poco tiempo, la verdad, para estudiar, para trabajar, sobre todo trabajar, porque era una cuestión económica, ganar dinero para las escuelas, para todo ese rollo. Entonces, sí, yo, por ejemplo, pues las consentía poco, pero siempre las escuchaba, ¿no? Y en problemas muy complejos que a veces llegaban y me decían cosas que yo decía, no sé cómo actuar, ¿no? No sé cómo actuar. Ellas me han enseñado muchísimo.
As I had so little time to study, especially to work, mainly because of economical reasons, I needed to earn money for schools and everything they needed. So I spoiled them a little, but I always listened to them, especially in very complex problems. Sometimes they would come and tell me things that made me think, I don't know how to act. They taught me a lot. In fact, they had been my teachers more than I had been to them. We have a very good relationship, even though they are no longer living with me. They know they can count on me, and I know I can count on them.
Well, you already told us a bit that you have always had one foot in academia and research. But despite that, have you encountered any barriers in your work and academic life to carry out your family life project? How do you think this generally affects scientists?
Pues mira, yo siempre vi que, por ejemplo, pues un investigador, claro, que tenía a su esposa que le ayudaba con los hijos, pues es diferente a como lo expliqué hace un momento. O sea, una mujer que está embarazada, que estás cansada, que a veces no entiendes el tema, que a veces fisiológicamente te cansas, ¿no?
Well, you see, I always saw that, for example, a male researcher who had a wife helping with the children had a different experience than what I explained before. A pregnant woman, tired, sometimes not understanding the topic, physiologically exhausted. Even if your husband helps, you still carry the weight of nights, sleepless nights, and feeding during the pregnancy. So a significant gap is created between a male and a female researcher of the same age. The man can advance more quickly, while the woman, due to these inherited issues, falls behind. You could have taken your children to work, but there are no changing tables, and you can't breastfeed them either because they don't have their suitable spaces. In my time, it was tough because if you said you were pregnant, sometimes you wouldn't even get the job or the opportunity to pursue a career because they would say, nah, she's just starting and she is going to get pregnant, so she won't finish. It's a bit terrible how they evaluate us. us. They evaluate based on publishing papers, the number of papers that you publish, and the number of students you have. This evaluation becomes a bit perverse because it doesn't differentiate between women and men. In fact, proven studies show that women were given smaller spaces and less money than men. And female scientists always earn less. In fact, I'm a technician academic. Initially, I didn't understand why I earn less money. However, the work of a technician is less demanding than the one of the researcher. So when they told me, well, there's this job as a technician, I said, perfect, because then I have fewer obligations and I can be with my daughters and see them grow and raise. That's why I say there's a difference. And the best thing I have done is to help my daughters, and I'm very happy with that.
So you wouldn't consider choosing the position of a technician over the researcher position was a sacrifice?
No, not at all. Although many colleagues see technical academics as a second class, especially where I'm working, for me it's a great pride to be a technician academic because I believe we do great work and we have the same titles as our researchers. We are Master of Sciences, Doctors of Science. We have helped many young people succeed. In fact, Danny, I also have a civil association related to the conservation of science. We are never truly idle. It's also a personal matter and contrary with what I do. And I am very satisfied to see my daughters to be on this path. And I know I will continue about 10 years more. I'm very venturing into other new things, like writing short stories. So I believe that as long as a woman or men's interest stimulates their minds, there is never an age to limit doing science. It's a fantastic journey. I love science. Being a biologist has been wonderful.
And within that same context, is there anything you consider that you gave up or sacrificed to continue in academia?
Es cierto que involucra mucho tiempo. A lo mejor sí sacrifiqué el tiempo de mis hijas, un poquito, ¿no?
Those of us who are biologists have a lot of interest in studying and learning. Indeed, involves a lot of time. I may have sacrificed a little of my daughter's time, not being with them more. For many years, I had no vacations. I spent my time working and studying. Yes, I saw them every day, but it was very brief. You know that this is fast, given how science is advancing. You have to learn, you have to take the exam. Now I have to graduate. So it demands a lot. I probably miss out on my daughters, especially the older one who left at 16. Having seen her grow and all the concerns at 17 and 18 because we were separated was difficult. But well, these are particular circumstances. She left very young and buying a ticket to Europe is not easy. And she couldn't come often either. If I were born again, I would do it differently. Maybe be a biologist, but spend more quality time with my daughters and take breaks. Now that I think about it, I don't know how many times I didn't take vacations, studying or reading, but it was worth it too.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people pursuing a career in academia, but sometimes they see having a family as a barrier?
Creo que no es una barrera, es todo lo que uno hace es enriquecedor para el camino de cada uno.
There's not a barrier. Everything you do enriches your own path. Organizing your time and pursuing your passion are the keys. Honestly, with my kids, instead of being an obstacle, they help a lot. I wouldn't change anything about motherhood. Also, let me tell you about the first time I became a mother in France. My daughter was born weighing 860 grams and dropped to 720 grams. I spent 3 months in the hospital with her, day and night. And it was very stressful because she was between between life and death. That's why I say I wouldn't change it. When they handed her to me after 3 months, I wondered what I'm going to do. Science saved me because I have my job here in Mexico, came back and start here. Yes, when you love what you do, you find a way. With the balance I have now, I could give more time to my family and to my kids. A scientific career is demanding, especially with the current standards, where you should write certain number of publications that make it more complex. But I believe living is the most important thing. Being well, being happy, having a partner, doing what you love. Sometimes we don't see that what surrounds us. I think I could dedicate a bit more time of that.
You're totally right. Well, considering everything we have talked about within the academic and research circles, living an academic career is often seen as a failure. However, there are decisions or circumstances specific to each researcher that led them to leave the academic path, and it doesn't necessarily represent a failure. But this label persists in various scientific media and academic environments. What is your opinion on such cases?
Yo creo que nada en la vida es un fracaso. Y sí lo digo honestamente, cada uno tiene un camino de vida muy diferente a los otros. Yo creo que lo peor que podemos hacer en la vida es compararnos con los demás. Nosotros somos únicos y somos irrepetibles, aunque suene a cliché, pero es cierto.
I believe that nothing in life is a failure. And I say this honestly. Each person has a very different life path. The worst thing we can do in life is to compare ourselves to others. We are unique and irreplaceable. Cliché as it may sound, it's true. Not everything is about science. You can be a biologist and do 20 things that can help the environment, help humans, contribute conservation, and contribute to many things. Being a scientist not only gives you the opportunity to do what you want with your knowledge. I think the labels of being a scientist are overrated because even if you are not in academia, you can do many things. It doesn't determine you as a human being or as a promoter of change in the world. What you are doing right now seems wonderful to me. Highlight the human side of people in science. Often people see us as a producer of papers, but they don't know how many times you didn't sleep, or if you were sick, or if you missed the funeral of a close family member because you have to work hard on a project with a deadline. They don't see that face of the scientist. I don't see it as a failure, not from my very personal perspective. Everyone has a lot to contribute to the world, and we are different. The worst thing one can do is to compare oneself to others.
Yes, that's right. And it's good that you allow us to show how scientists who are also human go through many difficulties and are ordinary human beings with many barriers. That's the idea of this podcast, for people to understand the human side of scientists, not just the typical cliche. Lastly, as we conclude, would you like to share with us a funny or unusual anecdote from your research? I'm sure you have many.
Hay unas que me gustan muchísimo porque que una noche dormí con el rey Pacal en Palenque porque nos llamaron para, había muchos murciélagos que estaban haciendo popó en las zonas arqueológicas, y el que era mi jefe un día dijo, no, sí, nosotros podemos ir a ver cómo los apoyamos y para que se vayan los murciélagos. Pues esa noche me encantó porque bajé a la tumba del rey Pacal y literal ahí dormí con él.
Well, there are some that I love. One night, I slept with the King Pacal in Palenque because they called us to see if we can manage the problem that bats were defecating on the archaeological areas. My boss at that time says, yes, we can go and see how we can help. I loved that night because when I went down to King Pacal's tomb, I literally slept there. Now it's closed. Before, you could enter and see the Pacal's tomb in Palenque. So when people say, oh, I haven't seen it, I found it very funny. I slept with King Pacal, and literally that's one of the beautiful anecdotes of my career. Or when you go to places that are breathtaking, where only biologists can reach. When I did my PhD, I was working in the Biosphere Reserve in Oaxaca. So I asked the guy, are we almost there? And he said, yes, we are almost there. I was carrying my nitrogen tank and my bath nets up to the mountain. It was very cold at night, and we have to stay up there. But the next next day, the sunrise and the valley seen from above were beautiful. So you said all this is worth it. It's really worth it. These are things that nobody sees. Also, I don't know if you know how beautiful Mexico is. There's a jade mask that is a bat mask, very emblematic in the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico. They called Dr. Medellin and myself as a specialist to see if we knew which species it was. Of course, we wouldn't know, but we said yes, we want to see it. So I had the bath mask in my hands. These experiences made me say, whoa, they are so worth it. Imagine, I slept with King Pacal and I held the mask in my hands. Life has given me beautiful things. When you go into caves, you see stalactites and stalagmites, and then you go and descend, and one day you see underground river. The truth is, being biologist is a wonderful gift to me.
Wow, you have inspired me. I haven't been in Mexico, but now I want to go. Thank you so much, Osiris, for sharing all these personal experiences, for sharing your opinion, for providing incredible advice to scientists from your perspective, and for being so objective. Thank you for sharing with us on this podcast.
With great pleasure. It was an honor for me.
Whoa, what are your thoughts on the interviews and the contrasting perspectives, Linda?
The gender perspective on the personal experiences and how each individual navigates the academic and personal aspects, challenges, and rewards are amazing. Danny, what stood out to you the most?
I appreciated a lot the clarity around the existence of structural gender gaps in society, echoing into scientific work and its institutions. For instance, Osiris shared how time management was genuinely challenging for her, in contrast to Gonzalo, who benefits from a biparental family structure, making it easier to distribute responsibilities. Additionally, as a man, one may not always perceive the potentially greater burdens that face women.
It is essential to note that, although many men contribute significantly to parenting, gender differences, especially in terms of salary and time, tend to be more pronounced when compared to women. I also found the conversation about leaving academia interesting, viewing it not as a failure, but as a change of path. Both Osiris and Gonzalo share the perspective that transitioning into a different activity or job does not equate to failure, but rather represents a shift within the institutional framework. As scientists or those passionate about the field, there is a continual source of inspiration to ask questions and solve dilemmas, which often leads back to scientific work, directly or indirectly.
Absolutely, Linda. I think many scientists share the view that this work is altruistic and worthwhile, even in the face of challenges. This aligns with Osiris' insights, such as pursuing a PhD at a certain age or incorporating other disciplines into scientific work, like engaging in outreach or integrating scientific knowledge into creative activities, or vice versa. The current scientific structure, I believe, remains narrow in its approach, and this narrowness contributes to perpetuating many of the cliches discussed in these chapters.
And people also might be wondering, why them? Both guests are family-oriented individuals navigating numerous challenges. Even though they are not renowned scientists or internationally recognized figures in scientific circles, these researchers contribute significantly to the dissemination of science, whether from an educational perspective, as Gonzalo does, or from the technical scientific side, like Osiris. Each of them plays a crucial role that often goes unnoticed during scientific interviews or paper publications. They are the individuals shaping scientists and supporting researchers in their demanding work.
That's very true, Linda. I love that both interviews convey the satisfactions these researchers derive from their roles as investigators, as family members, and as individuals striving to improve the world for everyone. To conclude, we want to express our gratitude once again to our interviewees and our audience for joining us in this inaugural series of our podcast, Science Behind the Glass, Illuminating the Human Side. These two episodes drew inspiration from the articles The Parenting Penalties Faced by Scientist Mothers and How a Part-Time Fellowship Enticed a Scientist Back to Academia, as well as Hope Jaren's book, Lab Girl. We'll provide reference to this and other materials in the episode description. description. And remember to join us every 2 weeks for the next episode, featuring more stories from the human side of sciences. This podcast is self-financed and self-edited by its hosts. Find us on YouTube channel, Spotify, and our official website. Follow us on social media like X, Facebook, and Instagram. Original music by our colleague and friend Bernardo Aguilar.